The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine courtyard of Buckingham Palace as Sergeant Marcus Thompson adjusted his dress blue uniform one final time. The United States Marine had been selected for an unprecedented ceremonial exchange program between American and British forces. At 28 years old, Marcus carried himself with the disciplined bearing that came from 6 years of service and 2 tours overseas. His polished black shoes reflected the early light as he marched toward his assigned post. The palace grounds buzzed with quiet activity as staff members prepared for the day's official ceremonies. Marcus had arrived in London 3 days earlier, briefed extensively on royal protocol and British military traditions. The exchange program was designed to strengthen diplomatic ties between the two nations, but Marcus knew he was walking into territory where every movement would be scrutinized by both his superiors and the British military establishment. Standing at attention near the palace's main entrance was Lance Corporal James Wellington of the Coldstream Guards. At 26, James represented 5 generations of his family who had served in the British Army. His red tunic was immaculate, his bearskin hat positioned at the precise angle required by centuries of tradition. The ceremonial sword at his side had been passed down from his grandfather, who had served during World War II. The 2 soldiers had been introduced briefly during Marcus's orientation, but protocol demanded minimal interaction during duty hours. However, both men possessed an intensity that went beyond their formal training. Marcus had earned his reputation through exceptional marksmanship and unwavering composure under pressure. His drill instructors at Paris Island had noted his ability to remain perfectly still for hours, a skill that would prove invaluable in ceremonial duties. James, meanwhile, had distinguished himself during his selection for the Queen's Guard through his absolute precision in drill movements and his ability to maintain the stoic demeanor required of royal sentries. His commanding officers often used him as an example for newer recruits, pointing out how he could stand motionless for hours, regardless of weather conditions or distractions from tourists. The first signs of what would become a legendary silent competition emerged during the morning inspection. As both guards took their positions for the changing of the guard ceremony, palace staff noticed something unusual. Neither man moved even the slightest muscle beyond what was absolutely required for breathing. Their eyes remained fixed straight ahead, their posture perfect down to the smallest detail. Colonel Harrison, the British officer overseeing the exchange program, observed the 2 guards with growing interest. He had served for 30 years and had never seen such complete stillness from ceremonial guards. Even the most experienced sentries would occasionally shift their weight or blink more frequently as fatigue set in. Yet here were 2 young soldiers who seemed to have turned themselves into living statues. The morning ceremony proceeded flawlessly, with thousands of tourists gathering to witness the traditional pageantry. Cameras flashed constantly as visitors tried to capture the perfect shot of the motionless guards. Children attempted to make the soldiers smile or react, while adults marveled at their discipline. Neither Marcus nor James showed any sign of awareness of the crowd's presence. As the hours passed, palace staff began to take notice of something extraordinary happening. Kitchen workers peered through windows, groundskeepers found excuses to work nearby, and even senior officials began to discreetly observe the 2 guards. Word spread through the palace's corridors about the American Marine and the British guardsmen who had not moved a single muscle in over 3 hours. Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell, the palace's medical officer, became concerned about the guards' well-being. She had seen soldiers collapse from heat exhaustion or dehydration during long ceremonial duties, especially during warmer weather. She positioned herself where she could monitor both men for any signs of distress, but found herself amazed by their condition. Neither showed any visible signs of fatigue, strain, or discomfort. The competition, though never spoken of directly, became apparent to anyone who spent time observing the guards. It was as if each man had recognized a worthy opponent and silently accepted a challenge that transcended national boundaries or military branches. Their stillness was not merely professional duty, but something deeper, a test of will and endurance that spoke to the warrior spirit present in both soldiers. By midday, news of the unusually motionless guards had reached the ears of senior palace officials. Private Secretary Sir Michael Pemberton made a point of walking past both positions, ostensibly on routine business, but actually to witness the phenomenon for himself. He had worked at the palace for 15 years and had seen thousands of guards perform their duties, but nothing compared to the absolute stillness displayed by these two men. The afternoon brought new challenges as the sun climbed higher and temperatures rose. Tourist crowds swelled, bringing increased noise, movement, and distraction. Street performers gathered nearby, hoping to capture some attention from the crowds drawn to the unusually still sentries. Yet neither Marcus nor James showed any acknowledgement of the growing circus around them. Sergeant Major William Davies of the Coldstream Guards found himself checking on the guards more frequently than usual. He had trained James personally and knew the young man's capabilities, but this level of sustained motionlessness exceeded anything he had witnessed in his 25 years of military service. The American Marine was equally impressive, maintaining perfect military bearing despite being in unfamiliar surroundings and wearing a different uniform than he was accustomed to. As the day progressed, a subtle crowd began to form among the palace staff. Workers found reasons to pass by the guard positions, and a quiet betting pool started among the kitchen staff about which guard would move first. The head chef, Mrs. Margaret Foster, declared that she had never seen anything like it in her 30 years of working at the palace. The late afternoon brought the day's most challenging test when a group of university students, emboldened by alcohol and the crowd's attention, began attempting increasingly elaborate efforts to make the guards react. They told jokes, made faces, and even performed impromptu dances. Security staff moved to control the situation, but not before both guards had demonstrated their ability to completely ignore even the most determined attempts at distraction. Captain Robert Hayes, Marcus's commanding officer who had accompanied him to London, watched with growing pride and concern. He had specifically chosen Marcus for this assignment because of his exceptional discipline, but this display exceeded even his highest expectations. At the same time, he worried about the physical and mental toll of such sustained concentration and stillness. As evening approached and the time for the guard change drew near, palace staff realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. Neither guard had moved beyond the minimal breathing necessary to sustain life. Their eyes had not wandered, their weight had not shifted, and their expressions had not changed for over 8 hours of continuous duty. The evening light cast new shadows across the courtyard as the first day of what would become known as the Great Guard Standoff drew to a close. Both soldiers had established that this was no ordinary ceremonial duty, but the beginning of something that would test the limits of human endurance and military discipline. The palace buzzed with quiet conversations about the American Marine and the British Guardsman. The second day dawned crisp and clear, with news of the previous day's extraordinary display having spread throughout the British military community. Word had reached the highest levels of command, and several senior officers made plans to personally observe what was being called an unprecedented demonstration of military bearing. Both Marcus and James arrived at their posts with the same unwavering determination that had characterized their first day, but now they carried the weight of expectation from their respective military hierarchies. General Sir David Blackwood, commanding officer of the Household Division, arrived at the palace earlier than usual. A decorated veteran with 40 years of military service, he had witnessed countless displays of military excellence. But the reports of the previous day's performance had captured his imagination. He positioned himself at a window overlooking the courtyard, determined to observe these two soldiers who had apparently redefined what was possible in ceremonial duties. The morning briefing for palace security included specific instructions regarding the two guards. Staff were told to monitor them closely for signs of fatigue or distress while respecting their obvious commitment to their duties. Dr. Hartwell established a discreet medical observation post, equipped with emergency supplies should either soldier require assistance. As the guards took their positions, the subtle competition that had emerged the previous day became even more apparent. Both men seemed to have studied the other's technique overnight, making minute adjustments to their stance and bearing. Marcus had refined his breathing pattern to be almost imperceptible, while James had achieved a level of facial control that made him appear more statue-like than human. The crowd of tourists seemed larger than usual, drawn by social media posts and news reports about the unusually dedicated guards. Professional photographers arrived with long lenses, hoping to capture the perfect image of human stillness. Documentary filmmakers began setting up equipment at a respectful distance, recognizing that they might be witnessing something historically significant. Colonel Harrison found himself in the unusual position of managing international attention. Embassy officials from both countries began making inquiries about the guards' performance, concerned about the physical demands being placed on their respective soldiers. However, medical monitoring showed that both men remained in excellent condition despite their extraordinary exertion. The morning hours passed with the same remarkable stillness that had characterized the previous day, but observers noticed subtle differences. Both guards seemed to have achieved an even deeper level of concentration, as if they had tapped into reserves of focus that few humans ever access. Their breathing was so controlled that several observers questioned whether they were actually alive, until the slight mist of their breath became visible in the cool morning air. Mrs. Foster, the head chef, organized the palace kitchen staff to prepare special high-energy meals for both guards during their brief off-duty periods. She had researched the nutritional requirements for sustained physical performance and was determined to support their extraordinary effort. The meals were carefully designed to provide maximum energy while being easy to digest quickly during the limited time available for consumption. The midday ceremony brought an unexpected challenge when members of the royal family made an impromptu appearance to inspect the famous guards. Prince William walked directly past both positions, pausing briefly at each post. Later he would comment that he had never seen such complete dedication to duty, describing the experience as both humbling and inspiring. Neither guard showed any acknowledgement of the royal presence, maintaining their unwavering focus. Dr. Hartwell conducted discreet health assessments during the brief moments when the guards were relieved for essential functions. Her examinations revealed remarkable physiological adaptation. Both men showed lowered heart rates and blood pressure that suggested they had achieved a meditative state while maintaining perfect military posture. Their muscle tension was precisely calibrated to maintain position without waste of energy. The afternoon brought a new level of public interest as news crews from major television networks arrived. BBC, CNN, and other international media organizations set up equipment around the palace perimeter. The story of the American Marine and British guardsmen who had achieved unprecedented stillness was capturing global attention. Sergeant Major Davies found himself fielding calls from military installations around the world. Training instructors wanted to understand the techniques being employed, while military historians sought to document what appeared to be a new chapter in the annals of ceremonial guard duty. The pressure was building on both soldiers, though neither showed any sign of being affected by the growing attention. Captain Hayes received orders from Marine Corps headquarters to document Marcus's techniques and performance for potential inclusion in future training programs. The Corps had a long tradition of excellence in ceremonial duties, but Marcus was demonstrating capabilities that exceeded established standards. Military psychologists expressed interest in studying the mental techniques he was employing. As the second day progressed, the competition between the guards became a study in human potential. Sports scientists arrived to observe what they recognized as a display of physical and mental endurance that rivaled any athletic achievement. The sustained control of posture, breathing, and concentration for extended periods was unprecedented in their experience. The late afternoon presented the day's greatest challenge when a sudden rainstorm struck London. Rather than seeking shelter, both guards remained absolutely motionless as rain streamed down their uniforms. Palace staff offered umbrellas, but protocol prevented any assistance that wasn't explicitly requested. The image of two soldiers standing perfectly still in the pouring rain, water dripping from their hats and uniforms while maintaining perfect military bearing, became iconic. Evening brought a meeting of senior officers from both military organizations. The extraordinary performance was creating diplomatic opportunities, but also raising questions about the limits being pushed. Medical experts assured the commanders that both soldiers remained in good health, but the psychological intensity of their competition was clearly escalating. As the second day concluded, palace records showed that both guards had maintained their positions for over 16 hours, with breaks only for essential biological functions. Neither had shown any sign of fatigue, distraction, or wavering commitment. The competition was no longer about simple military bearing, but had evolved into something approaching a spiritual discipline. The evening news carried the story internationally, with commentators struggling to find appropriate comparisons for what they were witnessing. Military experts discussed the implications for training and discipline, while philosophers debated the nature of human will and concentration. What had begun as a routine ceremonial exchange was becoming a global phenomenon. Staff members throughout the palace began referring to the guards with a mixture of respect and amazement. Veteran employees who had worked alongside generations of guards admitted they had never seen anything approaching this level of sustained performance. The American Marine and the British Guardsman had elevated their duty from mere ceremony to an art form that transcended national boundaries. The second day ended with both soldiers having demonstrated that their first day's performance was not a fluke, but the beginning of something truly extraordinary. Palace officials began preparing for what promised to be an even more intense third day, while medical and military experts from around the world made plans to witness what many were calling the greatest display of military discipline in modern history. The third day arrived with unprecedented international attention focused on Buckingham Palace. News crews from over 20 countries had gathered, while social media platforms buzzed with live streams and commentary about what media outlets were calling the Battle of Wills. Both Marcus and James approached their final day of competition, knowing that the eyes of the world were upon them. Yet their focus remained entirely internal, directed toward the personal challenge they had created between themselves. High-ranking military officials from across Europe and North America had arrived to witness the conclusion of what military historians were already calling the most extraordinary display of ceremonial discipline ever recorded. General Mark Rodriguez, Commandant of the Marine Corps, flew in specifically to observe Marcus's performance, while Field Marshal Sir Richard Henderson, representing the British Army's highest command, came to witness James's achievement. The morning preparation took on an almost ritualistic quality as both guards went through their routines. Marcus performed his traditional Marine Corps fitness regimen, followed by 20 minutes of meditation techniques he had learned during survival training. James engaged in the precise grooming and uniform preparation that had been passed down through generations of guardsmen, followed by mental exercises taught to him by his grandfather, a veteran of the Korean War. Dr. Hartwell established a comprehensive medical monitoring station with equipment borrowed from nearby hospitals. Cardiologists, neurologists, and sports medicine specialists joined her team to study what they recognized as an extraordinary example of human physiological and psychological control. Real-time monitoring would track both guards' vital signs throughout what everyone expected to be the most demanding day yet. The crowd gathered outside the palace was unlike anything staff had seen for a non-royal event. Thousands of spectators arrived before dawn, hoping to secure viewing positions for what many believed would be a historic conclusion to the three-day competition. Police established special crowd control measures while maintaining the dignified atmosphere appropriate to the royal residence. As both guards took their positions for the final time, the silence that fell over the courtyard was profound. Even the usual tourist chatter died away, as observers sensed they were witnessing something beyond ordinary human experience. Marcus and James stood exactly 20 meters apart, their positions carefully measured and marked by palace staff who had become invested in documenting every detail of the competition. The first hour passed with both guards achieving levels of stillness that exceeded even their previous performance. Medical monitors showed heart rates that remained incredibly stable, breathing patterns that were barely detectable, and muscle tension that was perfectly distributed to maintain posture without strain. Both men had transcended normal physical limitations through sheer force of will. General Rodriguez observed Marcus with profound pride and concern. The young Marine was demonstrating capabilities that pushed the boundaries of what the Corps believed possible, but the general worried about the long-term effects of such extreme mental and physical discipline. He made notes for future research into the techniques Marcus was employing, recognizing their potential value for elite training programs. Field Marshal Henderson found himself equally impressed and worried about James. The young guardsman was upholding centuries of British military tradition while simultaneously creating new standards for what could be achieved through discipline and dedication. Henderson began considering how James's techniques might be incorporated into selection processes for special operations units. The midday ceremony drew the largest crowd in the palace's modern history. Distinguished visitors included military attachés from dozens of countries, sports scientists from major universities, and meditation masters from various spiritual traditions who recognized the extraordinary mental discipline being displayed. The ceremony proceeded with unusual reverence, as if everyone present understood they were witnessing something sacred. As the afternoon progressed, both guards faced their greatest physical and mental challenges. The sustained concentration required to maintain perfect stillness was beginning to push both men toward the limits of human endurance. Yet neither showed any sign of wavering. Their breathing remained controlled, their posture perfect, and their focus unwavering. Dr. Hartwell's medical team noted some concerning signs as the day wore on. Both guards showed elevated stress hormones and blood pressure readings that suggested their bodies were working at maximum capacity to maintain their performance. However, their vital signs remained within acceptable ranges, and neither man showed any indication of wanting to abandon their challenge. The late afternoon brought an unexpected moment of drama when a sudden gust of wind knocked over a nearby ceremonial flag. The loud crash and commotion caused everyone in the courtyard to flinch or turn toward the sound, including seasoned palace staff and visiting military officials. Neither Marcus nor James moved even a fraction of an inch, demonstrating a level of focus that transcended normal human reflexes. Captain Hayes found himself struggling with conflicting emotions as he watched Marcus push the boundaries of human endurance. The young Marine was bringing honor to the Corps through his extraordinary performance, but Hayes worried about the personal cost of such intense competition. He made the difficult decision to let Marcus continue, recognizing that stopping him now would be more harmful than allowing him to finish on his own terms. Sergeant Major Davies faced a similar dilemma with James. The young guardsman was exceeding every standard of performance Davies had ever witnessed, but the intensity of his focus was clearly taking a physical toll. Davies chose to trust James's judgment while positioning medical support nearby in case it became necessary. As evening approached, both guards had maintained their positions for over 10 hours without the slightest movement. The crowd had grown throughout the day, with thousands of people maintaining a respectful silence as they witnessed what many described as a spiritual experience. The competition had transcended its military origins to become something that spoke to the highest potential of human will and dedication. The final hour brought an almost mystical quality to the scene. Both guards seemed to have achieved a state that went beyond normal consciousness while maintaining perfect awareness and control. Their stillness was so complete that several observers reported feeling a sense of peace and inspiration simply from watching them. As the official end of ceremonial duties approached, both commanders faced the unprecedented situation of how to conclude a competition that had captured global attention. The decision was made to allow both guards to choose their own moment to stand down, recognizing that any external intervention would diminish the achievement they had created together. In a moment that would be replayed on news broadcasts around the world, both guards moved simultaneously as the final ceremonial bell chimed. They turned toward each other, walked to the center of the courtyard, and exchanged a traditional military salute that lasted exactly 30 seconds. Neither spoke, but the respect and recognition in their eyes was visible to everyone present. The crowd erupted in applause that lasted for several minutes, while military officials from both countries stepped forward to congratulate the guards on their extraordinary achievement. Medical teams immediately began comprehensive examinations, finding both men tired but in remarkably good condition, considering their 3-day ordeal. General Rodriguez and Field Marshal Henderson jointly declared that both guards had achieved something unprecedented in military history. They announced that a new medal for exceptional ceremonial service would be created and awarded to both Marcus and James, recognizing their achievement as a standard that might never be equaled. Dr. Hartwell's medical report, published months later in military and sports medicine journals, documented physiological adaptations that had not been previously recorded in scientific literature. Both guards had demonstrated the human capacity to achieve extraordinary physical and mental control through pure determination and training. The 3-day competition became the subject of documentaries, military training manuals, and academic studies. Marcus returned to the United States as a symbol of Marine Corps excellence, while James became a legend within the British Army. Neither man ever spoke publicly about their techniques or motivations, maintaining the dignity and professionalism that had characterized their remarkable achievement. Years later, the silent showdown remained one of the most celebrated examples of military discipline and human potential. The competition had started as a simple ceremonial exchange, but evolved into a demonstration that redefined what was possible when human will was directed toward a worthy challenge. Both guards had proven that the limits of human performance are often self-imposed, and that with sufficient dedication and respect for duty, ordinary soldiers can achieve extraordinary things, who had turned a routine day into an extraordinary display of willpower and dedication.